Hello. It's been a long time since I've shown my face here, but I'm doing it now. So, I'm here because I recently heard that a game, Baldur's Gate 3, got some massive praise over several things that I've only skimmed, but that includes the content, the variety of gameplay situations, and also narrative situations on top of that, which the player can influence. And this apparently pissed off a lot of developers, which is unsurprising at this point. And along with that, there's a lot of people that are calling them out. And it went so far to the point that IGN actually apparently had a good point and a good take on how developers just panic over another game's success because apparently it breaks their illusion on certain criteria in games. I forgot what it was, but this is all sounding very similar to what happened last year, I believe, with Elden Ring. Now, granted, I am too freaking late to the party in terms of getting that game done and finally getting my ending, because I have been sleeping on the game so much so that I just gave it to my brother and just let him do his thing. Now, he doesn't get that much time, but when he does, I'm sure he's at least killing a few bosses, going through dungeons, and you already know. But I'm prefacing this because I am somebody who is currently studying for this sort of stuff. And unsurprisingly, it's something that takes quite a while, but certain things about it, like certain steps, because we're taught a pipeline, right? We are taught something that is basically a map that takes a step by step, and it's no secret at all. DreamWorks actually showed this with Skipper going through certain phases of it. You can actually find it online publicly on YouTube, and also screenshots for the roadmap itself. But all this to say that it takes a lot of work and a lot of time to dedicate in order to get something to look good, let alone play good. And, you know, it's not just something that is immediately picked up on. It takes several years to get used to this sort of stuff. Of course, that goes with any game or any job that can turn a profit, right? But certain things are just a one and done deal, which also leads me to apparently some people from Destiny decided to take a stab at it and say that it's hard to make armor, which I agree on. Modeling is pretty difficult, and I've only scratched the surface of it. Though that said, I am going to go further in this career, or in this step, because modeling and animation are the two things that I'm going to focus on. But also, if you have a decent handful of people and you're a AAA studio, I don't see how you can have that excuse, because Destiny 2 has a certain fidelity level that it has, because the game is pretty old. The game is over 8 years old, I think, and they're still pushing this up. Like, you don't have to push for polygons, and you don't have to push for pixels. You can just stick with what you have in order to have a certain level of consistency and just have it at that. Or you can actually modify the visuals and improve them, just like how Dead by Daylight did with certain graphical overhauls just in general, which make the game look better, and somehow it ran better too. I don't understand why, but it actually ran better on PS4, which was kind of funny. That said, I actually own a PS5 now. You can actually see it over here on the corner, and I've had it for a decent bit. But still, it pisses me off that just AAA developers feel entitled to be praised for whatever product they have, regardless of the product's quality. And that's because games like Elden Ring and of course Baldur's Gate 3 now have proven that there's a certain norm that needs to be broken in the gaming industry, both in gameplay elements and monetization, because Elden Ring, it doesn't give a fuck of what the moderate standards are. It just does its own thing, and it does it well. Well, in the meantime, modern gaming just tries to emulate each other. Like, certain companies just pick nickel and dime certain ideas never knowing why those ideas are good, if they are good at all. Like certain monetization, of course, we've already seen the skins in Call of Duty specifically. They go for outrageous prices. Like, I don't think 20 bucks is worth a single skin. 1/3 of the fucking game is worth that much. Then why are you supporting this company at all? If anything, at most, I believe it should be like 15 bucks for certain skins. Maybe. But at a minimum, or for the most part, I think the average should be at around like 7 or 5 bucks even. Especially if you mean for these to be distributed as often as they should. Because that is just one model that they're paying for 15 bucks. And they get thousands of models for 60. And by models, I mean literally everything. Maps, buildings, characters, objects. It all is just one model. And we take hours upon hours to make sure that it looks right for the world. And they're charging 15 bucks for one. Doesn't feel right. Now, of course, there's going to be some things here and there, like, it's not just a character, they also get certain guns. But they're just building off of what they already have. Like, it's just something that doesn't feel right. And of course, just people being like, hey, you should rate our game good because that's how we see it. Even though certain quality standards don't meet up, like your expectations aren't met up. Bullshit. We have indie developers that are making better games than these people are. Indie and AA studios. The reason that AAA studios are getting scoffed at now is because people are finally realizing what's wrong with the industry. Having to meet up with deadlines in order to make the most profit that you can possibly can. Countless people have already talked about this, but if you have investors, you've already fucked your game, because at that point you have to rush a product potentially, and you have to meet a certain level, like certain standards that they think is the safest. That's what kind of gets me riled up, and it's the reason why I'm playing certain games like Devil May Cry 5. I've played Resident Evil 4 already. Great game. Sifu is another one, which the developers of Absolver have made, which I haven't really dipped my feet into, but I still think it's fun. And also on top of that, this one isn't really like AA or indie, but Ghost of Tsushima. It was recommended by my same friend that recommended Devil May Cry, and it's a beautiful game. Like, the way that they have immersion is incredible. How the wind guides you to your objective, the way the fireflies indicate that you have an artifact that you can recover, the foxes and the golden birds, it's all like really impressive and shows you what the industry should do. Find different ways to enhance or to amplify certain experiences, and to give it, again, playing devil's advocate, because double and indie or AA, indie, and AAA can all make great games. I'm also playing the Dead Space remake, and this one could be a bit of a, you know, a bit iffy, because again, it's building off of something that they've done, but this is from the ground up. They're enhancing the gameplay, like they're making improvements to it that should have been done with the Dead Space 2008, and they're also making narrative changes to the point that it's a really expanded story that you could give a shit about if you choose to go through certain steps, to go through certain branches of the story. Of course, it's still a linear experience, but even still, it's a ballooning narrative, which is something that some games also should strive to have if they can. Now, another thing that gets me riled up is just the fact that Rockstar recently released their Red Dead Redemption port to PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch. I can just skim through the details because so many other people, again, have gone through this. But this is something that I want to discuss later, so just give me time on that. Long story short, developers are being fucking entitled, especially if they're AAA, and what they should strive to do is retooling certain gameplay elements, and also just trying to find ways to not appeal to a general audience, because that's how you get fucked in the ass. Devil May Cry and Elden Ring, or the Dark Souls series, are unapologetic to any newcomers, and it should stay that way because there's a high skill ceiling that needs to be mastered. That's the reason that these games are so fun to play and why they have such a massive fan base, despite the fact that it might look niche on the surface. And of course, this could boil down to difficulty, and it's still kind of funny. But of course, for anybody that wants to get into DMC and thinks that the difficulty curve is going to be massive, it can be at points, but also you can choose an easier mode depending on whether or not you've died, which is kind of guaranteed actually, so you're gonna see it. Except for Devil May Cry 2, because that game is easy just right off the bat, and the only challenge is not falling asleep to that fucking game, especially with Infested Chopper. But another thing that developers should strive to do is finding ways to just make a profit without appealing to investors, because again, investors are the reason that certain developers aren't pushing for what they should, or the same level of polish that they should, because again, deadlines have to be met. People need to be cut if they don't turn a profit as a result. And it's such a shame because it ruined games that are apparently really good, like Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. I was on the fence about getting that game because of financials, but at the time I was becoming more on the fence because of the polish. Like performance mode being 30 FPS on PS5, and they need to patch that shit in. Like, did they give QA enough time? like I heard quality assurance is a very important step for good reason. It helps you find bugs and glitches and gives you enough time for the programmers to properly maintain the game. And they just decided to skip most of it, or just didn't pay as much attention to it. This is why I admire most people in my friend circle that are getting into programming. There's one person in particular that told me that they're making a switch from modeling and animation games to just straight up programming, and I appreciate her for that, because we need more people like that in the industry. But still, again, we just need to they just need to have more lenient deadlines, or they just need more time in general in order to polish their games up and to a nice shine, because this is what we need from the industry, especially with the fact that modern games and new releases are $70 fucking. I saw Capcom released Resident Evil 4 for $60, as well as Elden Ring. They're not pushing for the moderate standards, and there's just absolute praise for those games. Is it any coincidence that they're also made by Japanese developers? They know their shit. They know what they're doing. It's happened ever since fucking Mario back in the 80s. So, if anything, we need to learn from the Japanese, because they know a lot about honor, and they carry honor even in the gaming industry, which is impressive. Or not impressive, it is inspirational. And I, as a Mexican American, want to learn more about that. But that's about it. I will discuss Red Dead Redemption later. Not later in the week, maybe just later today, depending on how quiet the house is, because it might have been a little loud over the course of the summer, but we'll see how that goes. And yeah, I have a lot of explaining to do, but again, I'll do that later. So, I'll see everybody around, and just drink water, even though it's the end of the summer. And if you're going back to school, then hey, just make sure you have your shopping done, and just, I pray for anybody that's in public school, just in general.